This conference will now be recorded.
Hello and welcome to the 10th GRN webinar. Today we're going to be looking at gamification and graduate recruitment, a subject that we haven't covered before. So we're very interested to find out everything we need to know about the implications for graduate recruitment. So first of all, my usual introduction, and there are some new members joining us today. So welcome to those people. A really nice mixture of companies like BBC, Tata Steel, Heineken, but also some interesting smaller techie firms that we've got along today to listen to our speaker. So a really nice attendee list for today's event. So my name is Dan Hawes. I'm the co-founder of GRB. If you don't know, that stands for Graduate Recruitment Bureau. We are the go-to platform for high caliber university students, graduates and recruiters. Established in 1997 by two graduates, myself and a fellow business graduate. We've grown steadily. We have 40 staff and over 1,800 clients across all sectors. Companies such as the Post Office, IBM, Unilever and Ocado, and several other fast-growing SMEs. Our team of recruitment experts have successfully matched over 8,000 graduates with full-time graduate level jobs. As you can imagine, we are pretty busy with lots of graduates seeking work and also several companies who are accelerating their graduate recruitment through this period. So, an introduction to the Graduate Recruiters Network. That should say GRN there in the left-hand side. That's our logo. We were set up by GRB back in January 2009. It was designed for our clients originally for them to come together and hear from speakers and share best practice. But recently we've extended that to friends of Graduate Recruitment Bureau. So these could be university careers staff we've worked with, or people that have retired maybe, or other people associated with graduate recruitment. So it gives us a very diverse membership. The aim is to bring together a range of graduate recruiters, so they could be HR advisors, HR business partners, recruitment directors and talent leads, to discuss current topics presented by a mix of relevant and influential speakers. The emphasis for members is to share best practice, ultimately, in an environment such as this, which is confidential. It hopefully will enhance your learning and help you become even better graduate recruiters. Now, we used to run events at the Institute of Chartered Accountants in London, but obviously since lockdown, we've not been doing that. We've been running webinars instead, far more frequently than our in-person events. And we're also reaching way more members with this format. So wherever you are, we're delighted to have you here along today. Now, at the moment, our membership currently stands at 2,850 members. It's an invitation-only organisation, and I've personally invited 450 new members throughout 2020. So we're slowly building up our membership, reaching out to certain individuals that can benefit from being part of a very large professional network of graduate recruiters. Now, membership is very broad. I've mentioned some well-known firms that are in the FTSE 100, for instance, that have a well-oiled machine when it comes to graduate recruitment, but we also have a range of members who are fast-growing SMEs. So I mentioned this a few times, and many of these are our clients. So they can tend to go below the radar, certainly for a lot of graduates, because maybe they're not in the Times Top 100, but there are many, many recruiters who are looking for graduates for a variety of reasons all over the UK. So we're delighted to have such a nice broad range of members in GRN. So as a member, once you've been invited, you'll also get invites to these webinars, access to the LinkedIn forum, where members get to post up any research or news or insights they happen to come across. We also have a blog on the Graduate Recruiters Network website, and we also run surveys throughout the year. So just to get a feel for how recruiters are, for instance, working through the pandemic was a recent survey, but we touch on various subjects throughout the year to get a feel for what graduate recruiters are experiencing at any one point in time. So the results are available on our website. We also run podcasts from time to time, and also a quarterly newsletter is generated, again with a mixture of news, insights, research, things that we hear about in the industry that we're more than happy to share with our members. So there's a brief overview specifically for some of the new members that have joined us to give you an understanding of the Graduate Recruiters Network. So our speaker today, he's Pete Jenkins. He's the CEO at Gamification Plus. He's going to be talking about gamification and graduate recruitment. Now, this is a subject many of us will have heard of, but we haven't actually had a speaker come along and talk at Graduate Recruiters Network webinar. So we are delighted to have him for the next 30 minutes or so. There will be the opportunity to ask any questions. So there's a chat facility within this platform. I'll be checking that throughout the presentation. And if you have any particular questions, I'm sure Pete will make himself available at the end for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. The presentation itself is recorded in its entirety, so you can listen back to it. And I will be uploading it to our YouTube channel, so you can listen back and share it with your colleagues if you wish. So I'd like to hand over to Pete now to talk about gamification and graduate recruitment. Pete, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Could you make me presenter? And I'll share the slides.
There you are.
Cool. Excellent. Hi, everyone. So I'm Pete Jenkins. Thanks for the introduction, Dan. Just to add a little bit, I live and breathe gamification. So I run a gamification consultancy, Gamification Plus. We've been doing 100% gamification work for 8 years now, and we do it mostly internationally, actually. So we won a Board of Trade Award for export from the DIT in February 2019, and that's led to getting a title of export champion for the Department for International Trade. I had to say yes to that, didn't I? I mean, it's got champion in it. I'm in gamification, so what a great title. I used to chair and am now honorary ambassador for GAMFED, the International Gamification Confederation, which is an organization all about spreading best practices in the world of gamification, which is why I'm pleased to be speaking to you today. And I used to be entrepreneur in residence, and I'm still a lecturer at the University of Brighton, where I teach entrepreneurship and gamification at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. I also guest lecture at King's College London on gamification for HR, so particularly around this sort of topic, and at ESCP Europe, London campus of the French Business School, on gamification for creativity and for marketing. I also run the main gamification conference, Gamification Europe, which is happening in about 8 weeks' time this year, obviously online, and the Global Gamification Awards, where we're looking for all the best examples of gamification out there, which is happening, or being launched in the next couple of weeks as well. And for my sins, I've been a ambassador, past vice president, etc., of the local Chamber of Commerce, Brighton and Hove, for 20 years now. So I'm quite interested in business and games and how they come together. And maybe I play a bit too much. My recent game I've been playing is Homescapes. It's a bit like Candy Crush. And I could tell I'm playing too much because I've played over 1,800 levels, apparently. I had a look earlier. So generally speaking, we work with various different types of company on lots of different topics. So with Southern Water, we've done some work on getting people to use less water, so changing behaviors that way. We've done some work on building safe places to fail in the workplace to make people more innovative. And at the moment, we're working on quite a lot of projects in the health space, so gamifying apps to get people to change their behaviors to be more healthy. And also, we're even working on a test and trace app, but not the NHS one. It's abroad. So it tends to be quite an interesting mix of things we end up working on. So very quickly today, what I hope to do is give you an insight into what is gamification and then some examples of its use in recruitment. And I'm splitting that into 3 sections: employer branding, skills and psychometric testing, and onboarding and induction, although there's more to that. And I'm going to end with giving you a tool we use quite a lot, designing player journeys, so that you could get started if you're not doing it already. And obviously I'm around for questions and answers at the end, and please do stick any questions in the chat. I might even get you to put some information in the chat during the session as well. In fact, I'll start that now. I'd like to know what your favorite game is, if you could put that in the chat. And because it's generally different over this COVID lockdown period, also what you've played most recently. And this could be any sort of video game, board game, mobile phone game, or even a sport. Okay, so the sort of games I really enjoy are strategy games like Civilization, where I get to take over the world, and obviously Homescapes, which I was just talking about a minute ago. And we've got a nice range coming in, from mobile games to strategic games like chess, and someone who hates all games on electronic devices. Nice mix. This will help. What we do in gamification is we steal from the success of the video games market and the overall games market. And to put that in perspective, there's a nice little chart showing how it's growing every year, especially in size, which just means more and more resources are getting put into doing this well. And to put that in perspective, there's a reason the video games market is doing well. So if we take one computer games company alone, Activision Blizzard, which owns Candy Crush, amongst other things, in the latest statistics I can get hold of, in the last 3 months of 2017, just players of their games played for a very large number of hours online. In fact, it was 29 billion hours. So like the average player of Overwatch or Destiny, some of their games might play online for 100 hours a month, which, well, what is that? That's a part-time job, isn't it? And it's not just the young playing video games. The fastest growing demographic of video game players is the over 60s. People are retiring, buying video games for various different reasons. They might be playing games to keep active, keep their brains active, or just because they enjoy them. We've got a generation now who were playing when they were younger and now retiring and have time to play again. And more of them are also playing because it's a way of interacting and engaging with their grandkids, for instance. It's not necessarily the same games the younger generation might play, although it quite often is. And in terms of spread, it's quite even between the sexes, okay? Generally speaking, if I run this as a quiz, most people will select the answers 27% or 41%. But actually, since 2014 in the UK, the spread has been between 48 and 52% between female and male video game players. In fact, the adoption of mobile phones and games on mobile phones seems to have democratized access to video games. And that's what we see in all countries as everyone gets access to mobile games and to technology. The split is roughly 50-50 between the sexes. So if we choose the right game mechanics, we can make gamification and games that are motivating and engaging to any demographic. What is gamification? The most commonly used definition is actually the use of game elements in non-game contexts, which is good and academic. I prefer this one, that it's the process of making activities more game-like, which is more of an instruction. This is how we do it. And it doesn't have to be that big and complicated. I like this that I found on Twitter, where you just get a nice bit of visual feedback from clicking the like button. Yeah, could be something like that, inspired by games, or it could be bigger, but it doesn't have to be big and complicated. In general, gamification is a way of, or a framework, shall we say, that we can use to practically apply all sorts of motivational theories. So you've got the theories, and this gives you a framework for actually making it happen in the real world. And that's one of the reasons the industry is doing so well and is being very successful. If you want an easy way to think about what we use gamification for, it's about changing human behavior. So generally speaking, we want to use some game elements to create less of a behavior, like with our Southern Water example, using less, getting people to use less water. For instance, we might motivate them to shower for less time. Or we want more of a behavior. So we want them to be a customer for longer, buy more, be more engaged, be more productive, be more innovative, lots of different things. So one way or the other, it's behavior related. Here's some impressive stats, but in essence, anyone who's millennial or younger kind of expects what they're doing to be gamified, whether it's in the world of work or outside it, which means it's easier for them to adopt new processes and things if they're gamified, and it's a pretty big industry. I like to flag up that actually games are about making things harder. So it's a bit different from some other techniques you might use, but any game is about us voluntarily accepting extra obstacles. So you could be running, or you could play the hurdles and have things to jump as well. And basically, what we're doing is making things harder for our potential customers. A good way to look at this from Rafe Costa is user experience design is about removing problems from the user, making things simpler, whereas we tend to make things harder in game design and gamification. As an example, if you've got a bit of content on your website you want people to engage with, traditionally you would make it really obvious, maybe point arrows at it, say read this. Whereas what we'll do in gamification is we'll hide it somewhere on the website as like an Easter egg. Or I've got a bit of content I want to share with you later, but you have to succeed in playing 7 levels of a computer game first before you can access it. Now, maybe I don't get as many people reading that bit of content, but those who do have earned it, and therefore they're more likely to do something useful with it, which is actually the behavior change I'm after. So if I'm gamifying the workplace, the key thing here is it's slightly irrational because I'm generally making someone's job harder, but I'm making it more engaging, so I'm going to get more of a positive result in the end. That's the aim. Okay. Very swiftly, I'm going to take you through a little bit of neuroscience just because it underpins what we do. I'm going to look at 4 neurotransmitters. Dopamine is the first one. I like this one, and we talk about it most of all because if we can trigger dopamine release, it's the only one that can be triggered before we do something. So if we can trigger it, we've got the most chance of getting someone to take an action. So we can trigger it by offering something surprising, like try a new experience, learn something new. It's also really useful in goal setting. So dopamine is released when we set goals for ourselves in anticipation of us achieving that goal. This is something games do really well. They get us to accept missions, quests, and so on, and we get a bit of dopamine release ready for it. It's also why if you write your goals down, you're more likely to achieve it because you're getting dopamine released as a reward in the head. So what's great about that is also we will use game mechanics to feed back to you about your progress towards that goal. So whether it's through points or some badges or going up levels, there's lots of different ways where we can keep rewarding you on your progress towards a goal. So that's dopamine. And if you wanted to trigger some now, you could say out loud or in the chat, I'm going to use gamification to, and do something with it. So for instance, I'm going to use gamification to inspire you to use more of it in recruitment. Stick that in the chat and you will release a little bit of dopamine, anticipation of succeeding in that at some point. The second one is oxytocin. So this is key to how we get on with other people. It's the social reward. Everything we do, if we do it socially, tends to be more rewarding. And interestingly, it's even been shown to work online. So if someone likes a tweet or Instagram picture or retweets us, things like that, we'll get a bit of oxytocin release, even though we haven't evolved to do that, which is great. It's one of the easiest things to build into a system online as well. It's also really useful in learning, actually, because oxytocin is released in your brains when you're listening to a story. So if you tell a story well, then when you're listening to it, it feels like you're in the story. This is great for learning because if I make something go wrong in the story, it feels like it went wrong for the person listening. Therefore, they're quite likely to learn from failing. Also, anything told in a story is easier to remember and spread. So if you're thinking about how to recruit and spread your message virally, oxytocin and storytelling is a good way to go here. So we've got a goal in the chat. So if you like that goal in the chat, say so, and you will help release a bit of oxytocin for Holly, who's added their goal. The third one of the four, serotonin. This one's quite easy. If you have enough of it, then you're happy. If you don't have enough, you're depressed. It's also one of the easiest ones to trigger by thanking or praising people. Okay, so it's also the cheapest one to use as a manager. You just literally need to thank and praise people, and they will generally get serotonin release and be more motivated. You also get serotonin release when you complete a difficult challenge. So this is what we do in games and gamification. We set challenges. They've got to be quite difficult. It's not just like logging into a system every day. It's got to be something that took a bit of effort. And then when you complete it, you get serotonin release. And if you then give someone something to represent it, like a trophy, a certificate, a badge, then every time they look back at that trophy, they'll get serotonin release again. So you can program yourself to be happier into the future just by making sure you can put your trophies and awards where you can see them. So if you've got any trophies or awards that you're proud of, stick them in the chat. Feel happy. I got Export Champion. They literally sent me a badge, a physical badge, which I put on a bag somewhere, and it makes me a little bit happier. If you really want to release some serotonin now, you could put something that you're proud to have achieved in the chat box. So yeah, maybe you're proud to have survived 6 months of lockdown. Maybe you're proud to have done your first marathon or your first run around the block, or have learned and mastered a new skill. For my sins, my new skill during lockdown has been learning to hula hoop, which I'm probably not going to show you today. The final one of the four, this is the one more traditionally associated with games, is endorphins. So these are being released along with the adrenaline while we're actually engaged in a challenge. So it's the excitement part of it, really, where we just really get into it. So what we're really trying to do in any gamification or game is try and trigger all four of these neurotransmitters. So I want to offer you something new and interesting to trigger the dopamine with a goal you can commit to. I want you to do it in a team or a guild, something like that, socially. So we trigger oxytocin. I'm going to design a challenge that's exciting to take part in to trigger the endorphins. And then I'm going to give you something to represent success. You'll get a good feeling of serotonin when you complete it, but also I'm going to give you a badge or a trophy or a certificate, something like that. And if I can trigger all four of those things, then I know I'm going to have created something really quite engaging. Very swiftly, I'm going to explain how that is represented in psychological terms. Most of you have probably come across Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm not going to say much about it, except to say that gamification assumes that we've got the bottom two layers of this in place, that people are feeling pretty healthy, that they're being paid a little bit. Basically, our survival needs are ticked. And then gamification itself takes place in the top of the triangle, in the self-actualization, esteem, and belonging parts. Not necessarily in that order for different people, but all of those things. So we need the bottom two in place. The main theory we see that relates to gamification is self-determination theory from Decky and Ryan. They say there's three basic needs, and if we can make these happen, then we've got someone who's very motivated. So relatedness is easy, that's doing things with other people. There's autonomy, which is about giving people choices. So if I'm recruiting someone now, and I want them to be really motivated in their job, I'm going to offer them lots of choice, like when they work, where they work, and how they work to increase their motivation levels. And the last one is competence, which is it's a bit fear-based, to be honest. It's about saying I'm only going to have a go at something if I think I've got a chance of succeeding at it. And interestingly, that's where onboarding and induction programs are really useful, is to make people feel like they've got a chance of being competent in their new job. So those three things around motivation. And then we looked at Daniel Pink. I'm hoping, because you're in HR/recruitment, that you've read his great book Drive at some point, because he studied what motivates people in corporates and companies. He sees three slightly different drivers in use. Autonomy still, giving us choices. Instead of competence, he coins the term mastery, which actually reflects on what we see in games much better. he realized that what we really like doing is getting better at stuff. And we feel really motivated when we master new skills. And I think that's a better fit and competence with what we want to aim to achieve in gamification. And he added a new one, which is purpose. And this is about being more motivated if there's a bigger purpose. So whether it's eradicating disease or getting rid of poverty, that sort of thing, or a meaningful purpose for myself, maybe it's quitting smoking or losing weight, anything I do towards those purposes is more engaging. And one of the things I have to do with all my clients is help them work out what the purpose of their organization is and make sure that's really obvious in the gamification program. Yeah, we worked with a client not far from us called ETI, Electronic Temperature Instruments, a while back. They just sell thermometers, really, that you put in ovens or in food when it's cooking. But their purpose was actually to prevent people getting food poisoning or dying. So it's a much more important thing than just selling a widget. What are they actually doing? The purpose was much more motivating. It's a great example of purpose in action. There's a website called freerice.com where they have two major purposes. One is to give the whole world a free education, and the other is to feed all the hungry people. And they've combined both those things into a quiz. So every time you get an answer right, you're basically learning something and donating 10 grains of rice to the World Food Program, which is kind of cool. So you can play that later, but not during my talk, all right? Otherwise, I'll lose you. And then 10 grains of rice doesn't sound that much, but they fed over 10 million people through this program, which I think is great. So stick all these things together, and you've got Andrzej Marzuski's 3 layers of motivation. In essence, the base layer from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need this in place before we can work on the gamification and the motivation. 90% of our work in gamification is in this emotional layer in the middle, which is a combination of self-determination theory and Dan Pink's drive. So taking the 4 most motivating bits into ramp: relatedness, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If ever I get stuck with a gamification project, I just quickly check that I've got something happening for each of these 4 things, and it's probably likely to be motivating. So that's where most of our effort is. And what people often think is gamification, the trivial game mechanics, points, badges, leaderboards, and so on, is at the top. But we only use these to trigger the emotional layer. So we don't just add points without thinking about what the emotional impact is. So I will put people into a guild or a team for relatedness. I'm going to give them worlds to explore or different tactics and strategies to use for autonomy. I'm going to give them boss fights and difficult levels to crack in order to demonstrate mastery. And I'm going to have some sort of epic purpose, which might be the company's purpose, or it might be to defeat the zombie outbreak or the zombie hordes. Okay, it has to come back down to that emotional layer in the middle. That's the essence of gamification there. If you want to get advanced, you can have a look at Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow, because he noticed, first of all, with mountain climbers, that they would spend hours in this state, a sort of fugue state, where they were paying utter attention to what they were doing, otherwise they would fall off and potentially die. But they would lose track of time. They were utterly focused, really enjoying it. And what do they do when they get to the top of a mountain? They immediately think about, which one am I going to climb next? So there's something very engaging and enjoyable about being in this state. Then he studied performance athletes, then creatives like artists, and then people in the world of work. And if you've got a vaguely interesting job, then you're hopefully in a state of flow at least a couple of times a week, where you lose track of time and you're really absorbed in what you're doing. Now, the trick to doing this is actually about understanding challenge and how difficult things are. So whenever we're looking at something, if we look at the challenge level, the more challenging it is, the more likely it's going to make us anxious. So if you see someone anxious at work, they're quite likely working on something they really don't feel confident they've got the skill to do. But the higher your skill level, combined with the challenge level, then you can get into a state of flow. Okay. If you do something very simple, it's quite relaxing as well. So you can't live in a state of flow the whole time. It's quite intense. So what we're trying to do always is make things more difficult, just more difficult enough to make it engaging. And this is what games do. You level up and the next level is harder. Yeah, so that's what we have to design into our gamification programs. Otherwise it gets boring. Yeah, you also have to make sure there's a chance to retake a level if it's a bit too difficult. I think Candy Crush is a pretty good example of that. If you chat to someone and they say, I spent 3 days stuck on this one level, but they're able to retake it and retake it. So that's the theory. I think that's probably the fastest I've ever gone through all the neuroscience and the psychology of it. But that gives me more time to talk about a few examples. So I want to show you 2 or 3 examples of each of these types. So for employer branding, so what's the first time you get your message in front of a potential recruit? I really like an example from a few years ago, Domino's Pizza Hero. This was a good game because you could, as a customer, you could just use it to design your own pizza. But the better you got at it and the more you shared your custom pizzas, then the more likely you would get a job offer. And so basically because you were really interested in pizza and quite good at putting them together. So out of this one, over 800 actually got to work in their local Domino's. And I've got a link. I'll make sure the slides are shared as well, so you can drill down for more information. This one I like, Maersk, you probably know of, famous for distribution, but a few years back, they were also the 3rd or 4th largest offshore oil drilling and engineering company, but they really struggled to get that message out there, and they struggled to recruit oil engineers. So they actually created a game for people to play around what it's like. So the game would teach you how to analyze seismic maps. It would teach you about their distribution. You could level up and search for oil, run offshore oil rigs, run a regional distribution technique. So in essence, you could visualize your career path within the game. It was pretty successful. It got a lot of coverage on lots of business news sites. And there was a version 2. One of my postgraduate students a couple of years ago was actually at Maersk when this was launched. And internally, although it wasn't really designed for the people who work there, they all thoroughly enjoyed playing it and competing against each other as well. So it's a sort of bonus from it. And of course, you know, everyone else has to get in on the game then. So for a while, there's been a Shell Explorer game. It's quite simple, so it's a bit more just like viral interest than teaching you everything about your future career. But you can play this game and work out, take gambles on where you're going to find oil. It's quite good fun. I played it. There's a nice trailer link to watch that in action as well. So those are 3 easy examples for employer branding. I'd say probably the fastest growing part of the gamification industry that I can see is in the psychometrics and testing skills part of recruitment. So locally in the UK, we've got companies like Arctic Shores who are doing behavior-based assessment, which is basically you're playing a game and learning a lot about people in a very short amount of time while they're thoroughly engaged. The whole point of gamifying this is you're much more likely to get to the essence of what someone really thinks, because all they're aware of is they've got to play the game and play it to their best of their ability. It's difficult for them to game the psychometric test. I know 20 years ago when I was last being recruited for something rather than running my own business, that I would get a psychometric assessment. I'd think about the role I was applying for and then try and answer the questions based on that, which is not quite the same. Whereas when you're playing a game, you just get into it. There was even an Australian one I saw once, which was designed to help find customer service agents. Or actually, it was designed to help find who would be bad at being a customer service agent. So you'd play the game and get absorbed in it, and then halfway through, the rules would change. And how people handled that or not was your clue as to whether they would be good for customer service. I watched people play this at a conference, and even though they knew that's what it was going to do, they got really upset when the rules changed if they were not that way inclined. Okay. As an interesting outcome from all these gamified psychometric games is that it seems to be increasing inclusion and diversity very well, because you're just getting results based on people's skills and psychometrics rather than all the other biases we have day to day. So Arctic Shores talks a lot about that on their website, and they won a gamification award last year or the year before as well for some of their work. there's some interesting other approaches to it as well. I like Owiwi, which came out of Greece but is now here in the UK as well. This is more of a story-based game, and based on how you play the game and the decisions you get your characters to make when you're going through it, it learns about you and quickly works out your skill set or your psychometric profile. This one seems to have the most scientific research backing it up as well, as far as I can see from the academic literature, and it's a lot of fun. All of these things, by the way, are also the first impression your potential recruits are going to have for joining your company. Oh my God, the first thing they did was they got me playing a game, which is a great way to stand out from the competition. There's another one, benchmark games. This came originally out of a project that they did with IBM quite a few years back, and I've been following them for a while. They do a more statistical game-based approach. So say, for instance, you've got your 100 best employees, you'd get them to play this game and then match potential recruits against that. So I then play the game, and if I come up as a good match with someone who is a good existing employee, I'm likely to recruit them. If you're really good, you also get your 100 worst performing employees to play. You don't necessarily tell them that they're worst performing, and then tell benchmark games who they are, and then we can see who would be a bad fit. I know they used this with Coca-Cola in Hungary for quite a while, for a few years, and but while still letting managers recruit the traditional way as well, and eventually they could easily see a correlation between better performers who were recruited this way. Unfortunately, the old-fashioned way did not work as well. This one I like as well. There's one of the games, Curiosity, which is about helping form high-performing teams. So I'm actually getting my undergraduate students to play that game tomorrow. I've got 50-something students. Then we're going to form them into high-performing teams, so a mix of strengths based on their results from this. So that's quite a lot of fun to do. I've used it in the past for recruiting interns as well, and ended up choosing people who were different from the ones I would have chosen just through a normal interview process, which is, and you know, so for instance, I'm a starter. I come up with creative stuff, and because of the high-performing team style of things, I chose an intern who was actually a completer finisher. What an amazing productive year that was. Okay, so that's the profiling and psychometrics. There's others out there as well. There's quite a few in Australia. There's a company called Rebellion that does some good stuff that you can play if you're at a jobs fair or expo. Not that that's particularly happening now, but they're all designed to work online as well. And then once you've recruited them, it's important to keep the flow going. So there's quite a lot of gamification happening in the onboarding and induction space. It's also the easiest place to experiment for cheap. In induction processes, it's quite easy to try stuff out and gamify elements of taking a normal induction tick box exercise and making it a treasure hunt or some other challenge. And there's quite a few platforms out there for doing this sort of thing. I noticed PwC in July for their virtual internship scheme have created many games around onboarding their virtual interns. And there's a good article about how well that's going. So they've obviously only picked this up and launched that this year. There's off-the-shelf platforms. I like Gamatize out of Singapore. They've got a bunch of templates, so you can quickly and easily customize an onboarding template or a pre-onboarding template and gamify aspects of it for a very cost-effective price. And I mean, there are countless other platforms out there, and there's a lot of e-learning platforms that also do onboarding and induction programs. I quite like SelfDriven. This is Malaysia and Singapore based. They've integrated with Microsoft Teams. So they don't just do the onboarding, they then move it into productivity and cultural engagement as well. So keeping it going, not just for that induction period. So, and then you can go on and on after that. You can have gamified wellness programs, all sorts of things, and innovation programs. But this being recruitment, I'm just going to talk about those three areas for now. So what's the tool? How do we get started on this? My favorite tool is around designing player journeys. The key thing here is if one of these steps is missed, generally a gamification project doesn't work. And most games and gamification is in the scaffolding or habit building phase. So this is the habit we want someone to build every day, like pick up the phone more, whatever it might be. Yeah. But the discovery phase is we need to get someone excited about it before they even take part in our game. The onboarding phase is about getting them comfortable with how the game works. Yeah. So the whole competence part of self-determination theory. I'm only going to give this a go if I think I know how it works. Then it's the game. And then the mastery phase is, well, what do you do with people who are really good at a game? Yeah, if the game just tails off, you potentially take your person who is keenest and make them least happy. So there's three main ways we can help in that phase. The best reward anyone wants when they're playing a game is more content, more levels. It's not the cheapest from building a game point of view, because you have to create more, but that's the best reward. Second best would be to wrap it up. So say, hey, excellent, you finished the game. Here's a trophy, a certificate of completion. It's over. So at least I know it's finished. One of my personal favorites, though, is to take someone who's mastered the game and then ask them to mentor someone else through the process as well. And that, in essence, gives them the extra content and a different level of challenge. And they get to do it all again, but with someone else. So it adds that whole social aspect. There is a great little video I'm about to show you. I don't know if you'll hear the audio because I haven't used this platform before, but let me just show it to you. I think it shows all 4 of these steps in just 2 minutes. Just to quickly translate, you've got 30 seconds to climb up, jump, and if you can grab the jacket, you win it. So what have we got there? We've got all 4 steps in the player journey in one little video. The discovery phase is really quite exciting. The floor starts moving. You're like, what on earth is going on? You're quite excited, maybe a bit scared. Yeah, so we've got that emotional intensity going on right from the start. The onboarding is very physical. You're literally hanging onto the wall, and you're getting the first part of the game, which is that you're going to be climbing the wall. Yeah, merely by hanging on, you now understand a key game element. The game itself is to climb the wall and take a jump, a leap of faith, as it were. So you can see even the people who don't win and grab the jacket still have a big smile on their face, because the game is about conquering that fear of heights, shall we say, going up and jumping into the air. I'm pretty sure if everyone who missed probably said, can I have another go? It looked like a lot of fun. And the mastery is really obvious. If they grab the jacket, they win it, and they're going to wear it for weeks, telling everyone they meet about it, probably insufferably, which is great viral marketing, obviously, as well. Okay, so that's the essence of the player journey. How do we actually design one? What we have to do with gamification is think about emotions, because we're motivating people, and people are all about emotions. It's not about hard facts and figures. It's about triggering some emotions. So what we like to do is think about what emotions we want someone to experience, not what we think they're going to experience, but what we want them to experience on each phase of the player journey. So in the first phase, the discovery phase, if I was running an insurance company, I might be selling insurance and I want them to feel fear to get them curious. Generally speaking, we're talking about curiosity and anticipation. Onboarding is about making people comfortable, but maybe also about social and understanding who else is playing. This example, by the way, on the screen is from an innovation challenge design for a large company. So aimed at teams of people to enter innovations into a platform. So we wanted them interested and empowered because they weren't usually listened to. So we needed to put that across in the discovery campaign, the marketing for the plan, for the platform. The onboarding phase was about working out who they were going to be working with. The scaffolding phase was the actual day-to-day submitting ideas and doing the habit we want them to do. And the mastery phase was obviously about feeling a sense of pride, job well done, that sort of thing, but also protective about the other people in the team. And so we need to get all these four things together. And if ever you forget or wonder why your gamification program doesn't seem that fun, you probably need to come back to the emotions and make sure we're trying to trigger these. And the more interesting the emotion, the better. So I have a client in Cairo who wanted to gamify getting people to use the stairs instead of going up in the lift. And in the discovery phase, to test me, I think, they used an emotion of romance. We want romance in the discovery phase. How are we going to use that? And I was like, that's brilliant. We can use that. Let's have some promotional material about how you're going to be fitter, look better, and end up romantically entangled with the partner of your dreams because of taking the stairs instead. And there were some ideas around blind dates in the lift shaft, in the stairs and things, which maybe shouldn't happen. But you know, it gives you some fun stuff to work with by choosing a more specific emotion. And there are some great tools out there. I like this one, the emotion wheel from the Junto Institute, because most people get stuck on the 6 main emotions in the middle. But actually, the more specific we can get on our design, the more interesting the gamification we come up with. So I have some students a couple of years ago who wanted to design a game to encourage lecturers to be better lecturers at university. And as in the mastery phase, they chose the emotions of awestruck and speechless. So they had to design a way to make that actually happen. So they decided to get all the students together who that teacher had taught that they could get hold of from that year, previous years, and have them all in the room together when they awarded the trophy. I guess that would be all in the Zoom together now online. And so you just remember, try and choose 2 or 3 emotions for every phase of the journey, and you're going to take people on an emotional journey to get there. And this is what it can look like in a modern business. So Mars in Spain, they've been doing quite a few gamification projects and now run 125 different games, some in employee engagement, some in recruitment, some in productivity, some in the call centers. And this is like where you end up wanting to get to. If I've recruited someone through a gamified platform, then I need to keep their whole working life gamified as well, to just keep getting that level of motivation and engagement out of them. Okay, so it's possible. Okay, I've reached the end of my examples and the theory. On my website, I've got a success framework, the steps we go through to run a successful gamification project. But to access it, you've got to play 7 levels of a game at gamificationplus.uk/game. It's pretty easy. This apparently is me, is designed by my team. So don't let me die. I die a little bit each time. You've just got to collect all the icons to get to the end. Sounds simple. Also on the website, as well as that, are some other resources, white papers, lots of videos from previous year's conferences, and many of which are very relevant to recruitment, and a reading list if you've got excited and passionate and want to go deeper. Okay, what I'd like to do now is hand back to Dan to facilitate any Q&A. But thank you very much for listening, engaging, and I'm seeing some good comments and some good examples of games in the chat as well. So Dan, if you want to come back on and let's see what questions we got.
Absolutely. Pete, that was brilliant. I knew it'd be good, and you didn't fail. Very engaging and a very interesting subject. I mean, when I came up with the title, unimaginatively gamification and graduate recruitment, I couldn't think of anything else because it has so many applications across the entire process: branding, candidate experience, testing, assessments, onboarding. You know, it really is, you know, all pervasive when it comes to graduate recruitment. So thank you very much. It was really insightful. Thank you for sharing, Pete.
My pleasure.
Now, we have the opportunity now, maybe for 10 minutes, for any questions you may have. We will also be putting a message on the LinkedIn forum, so there will be opportunity to, if you have to dash now, Pete hopefully will make himself available in the next 24 hours to jump on the forum. But we're having a few questions come through now, which is brilliant. Now, often with these kind of things, people are very interested in the cost. I know it's very, very hard and depends on so many different factors. But someone said, you know, if you're a small firm, maybe less than 20 people, you know, how can you do this cost effectively? Now, I know you mentioned there were some templates there.
Yeah.
That people could maybe get up and running with a few basic games, presumably, and then maybe pay more for something more sophisticated. But, you know, what's the kind of entry level point for a small firm that's 20 people maybe? What could they do to make a start?
Okay, so I mean, depending on which bit you're doing, so the templated site, from memory, starts from like $40 or $50 a month. Yeah, because they're just global, and that's why they just keep adding templates after templates. So you go in, you customize it with your own brand and feel, and get started doing that. If you're gamifying your induction program, you could do that all manually and just put some effort into it. Yeah. You know, you could setting up a treasure hunt. People have often done that, you know, for a child's party, things like that. So just think about it, take it on a bigger stage. Yeah. But in terms of the psychometric assessments and stuff, all of those platforms I showed you are designed for white labeling, for it inserting on a corporate website, yeah, or on your recruitment, you know, website, so you can have all your candidates going through it. They all have very different price points, though. Okay. Yeah. Interestingly, all three of those I'm aware of can scale. So I put them in touch with a Swiss snacks and chocolate company not that long ago, because there they had a requirement for digital mindsets because of COVID. They want to make sure, they wanted a test to go through all their current staff and check their digital mindset and how flexible and agile they are, and then also go through all candidates. So they're looking at, like, just for the European region, 100,000 people taking the test each year. So and that's the beauty of online games as well, is they can just scale. You just throw some more server resources at it and everyone can play it at once. Yeah. One of those has done campaigns where they had 10,000 people playing in one day because there was a promotion around it.
Wow. Yeah, and particularly now employers finding it difficult to do anything face to face. So a lot of the recruitment processes are now switching online. So, you know, a psychometric test that's gamified is a good solution. And you're going to get instant engagement because we've all played games and puzzles and we're sort of raised on this habit, and we enjoy them. But it's interesting here that Nicola's made a point. Are regular gamers at an advantage in these scenarios?
It's a good question. I don't think the answer is not really, mainly because most people have played a game. Yeah. So it doesn't matter whether it's online or it's a board game or a card game. The principles are the same. Also, you know, because, well, what is it? Something like 98% of all kids and teenagers have played a video game.
98%.
So, yeah, it's different in developing world, but here in the US and so on, it's a very, very high percentage. So that's the majority. It's very rare to find someone who hasn't played any games. The biggest issue we have actually within organizations is it's often the over 50s that get really excited about the gamification and maybe play too much because they've now finally got a chance to play at work. But we can build checks and balances in. There's quite a lot of gamification projects now where it limits how long you can play for each day.
Yes, I'm sure there are. It can be very addictive. We have another question here from a university careers advisor. So what tips would you give a student who's preparing to take a psychometric test with gamification elements? Is there a practice site you could recommend, for instance?
Now, interestingly, I would recommend they don't do any practicing.
Right.
Because if you take one of these psychometric tests and you've played it before, you will get distorted results. Okay,
Right.
so because I'm always testing these out, the first time I took the benchmark games test, I got this interesting result around being innovative and creative and various different ways I approach things, which was very accurate. But I took it again to demonstrate it to someone, and of course I'd already played it, so I played completely differently, and I came back as like sort of stubborn, unwilling to change, and so on, because I already knew how it worked. So if you wanted to give them any practice, it would actually just be in playing other games, okay, and getting a feel for those. But they're not long, any of these. They're like 10 to 15 minutes generally. Quite a lot of them now, you have to put aside that 10 to 15 minutes. You cannot go back and try again, so don't get interrupted. They'll always tell you that sort of rule, but it does make a difference to your results, because it's about how you get into the game and the decisions you're making as you get stressed in the game that give you the interesting data points.
Excellent, thank you. Another question here from Janine, and she said, what potential games would you suggest using at career fairs? Now, we go to lots of career fairs, and there's various ways of bringing people to your stand, not just freebies. But, you know, some people have a very basic test, you know, with a hoop that goes around the bendy wire and it makes a noise. I don't know what that's testing. A steady hand.
Surgeons, maybe?
Yeah. And are there any games that you could suggest, you know, having on your career stand and actually being able to identify certain skill sets right there and then? So
the short answer is yes, some of these were designed just for that, so you can stand out from the other people at the skills fair. So you would have a bunch of laptops or tablets that people could play the game. So there, if anything, you just want the shortest length ones so that you can get more people through.
Yeah.
But they're all generally somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes long. Some of them just test basics as well. So, you know, numeracy, spelling, things like that, but in a really fun way.
Yeah.
As well as the psychometric testing. But also just try and work out which ones would most suit your brand and the message you're putting across. And obviously many of these can be reskinned quite quickly to look like they're relevant to your brand.
Okay.
And just think about the skill that you're really trying to recruit for that day. There's probably a game that measures or uses that skill somewhere that you can be inspired by. Yeah, if I'm at a recruitment fair for, I don't know, leaders, I might just get them all playing Risk, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be too complicated, but yeah, I mean, they're always engaging. You know, who doesn't like a game? Unless you lose, of course. But that North Face one was obviously another level. That was really, really clever stuff. And you know, they're very subtle ways of getting the information you need as a recruiter without them realizing. I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Do you know what? There's a good book. I'll end on this. Which basically it's a parallel industry, but it's games and gamification in market research.
Right.
So basically, it's about getting people to play games and learn about them and their profiling and their needs and requirements while they have fun. Yeah. So it could be something as simple as getting someone to customize and build their avatar, and the things they select to decorate and use on that avatar tell you something about them as well.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So I mean, you can go deeper on these things. Definitely.
Yeah, and we're running out of time, so I'm just going to use the remaining few minutes to thank you very much, Peter, and everyone who's come along and engaged in the chat. I've just got a few final announcements I'd like to make. Our speaker, Pete, will be on the LinkedIn forum within the next 24 hours or so. So if you do have any questions, jump on the forum. I'll post the first message, and if you've if you've got something specific you'd like to ask, or one of your colleagues, then by all means jump on the forum. Our next webinar is on Wednesday, the 11th of November, There's been a long-time friend of GRN, Dr. William Donald. He'll be talking about some research they've done on the impact of COVID on recruitment. So that will be available to book right now. Actually, we've just posted that live. So go to the Eventbrite page, book yourself in for the next webinar on the 11th of November. And finally, if any of you are interested in being a mentor, and I know some of our members have jumped on this platform, we've launched a sister site called graduatementor.uk. It's an entirely free platform for graduates who we've identified that are really struggling right now. So a lot of them are from disadvantaged backgrounds, very diverse backgrounds, not your usual STEM Russell Group graduates. These are a different segment of the huge graduate population that are really struggling right now. And we're going the extra mile by, with this platform, enabling graduates to have one-to-one hourly sessions with mentors. So we've got GRN members on there, we've got some of our clients, but they're all inspiring recruiters, business leaders, professionals, university career staff, or professional mentors or coaches. So as part of our campaign, hashtag help the COVID generation, we've launched graduatementor.uk. So we'd love to have any of our members on there if they're willing to offer some of their time during the week to help graduates make the first step into the world of work. Okay, that means we're out of time. Once again, thank you everyone for coming along, and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Pete. Bye-bye now.
Bye.